Thanks for joining me in this video where I want to start by overviewing the rest of the flooding and severe weather risks that we're going to see out of individual storm systems as we continue to see extreme weather really setting up at least through the middle part of the weekend for parts of the central and eastern US. Then as we go deeper into the video, I'll talk in more detail about some of the specific hazards day by day. Let's start though as we push things out of our Thursday into our Friday with this overview on screen. And as you can see, more of the same zones that have been seeing active weather recently getting in on action as a new low pressure system will be forming along the jet stream as we go deeper through the day Friday. As it sits around Kansas, by the time we go to the evening hours, we'll be watching the continued flow of moisture and heavy rainfall that could at least induce flooding, pushing all the way northbound and into points south of where this line is drawn. That's your warm front from parts of Missouri and Illinois and Indiana all the way on over to Ohio. Flooding rains and at least isolated severe weather will be possibilities as we go deeper through the day Friday. It's back down to the southwest of this warm front, though, where we're going to have the warm sector interact with a cold front moving in from the west, and that's where we're going to have a better chance for more severe thunderstorms from eastern Kansas, eastern Oklahoma, parts of Texas, and then stretching into Arkansas and Missouri. Not only hail, not only damaging winds, but the threat for significant tornadoes will exist as we go towards Friday and Friday night. And again, I'll be breaking down all of these threats as well as the flooding that could occur over many of these zones in more detail here in just a few minutes. Training rain will lead to that flooding to continue over a lot of the Ohio Valley back down to at least the southern plains by the time you go through the day Saturday. That low that I referenced for Friday will quickly move up into the Great Lakes region and drag a lot of the rain with it all the way up towards Pennsylvania and New York by the time we go towards, say, around 1, 2 o'clock into our Saturday afternoon. Around that same time, a new low pressure system will be forming up around Texas, drawing up even more moisture. These warm sectors just keep getting more juiced up with moisture, and that's why our flood threat will only continue to go up after these rounds of rain persist over the same zones. So more flooding and possible severe weather for parts of not only Oklahoma and Texas as we go out of Friday night, but also eventually moving further to the east into parts of the lower Mississippi Valley through the day on our Saturday. There will be a little bit of snow on the backside of that low, and that could eventually ride on up into zones that have been seeing rain as of recently. By our Sunday morning, possibly watching snow in places like eastern Kansas getting into western Missouri. But around that same time, we'll be watching the storms from overnight Saturday night, continuing to push through Kentucky, Tennessee, where not only severe weather, but of course very dangerous flooding could likely be hazards. Back down to the lower Mississippi Valley, we'll watch these storms push from there and over into the rest of the southeast U.S., where flooding won't necessarily be as much of a concern, but we could still watch severe weather to wrap up this event as we go to the very end of the weekend into our Monday time frame. A little bit of snow could also be possible as this event wraps up into parts of the Ohio Valley, stretching into the northeast. Looks like things would cool down and we'd just be dry overall for a lot of the country, finally, by the time we get towards Tuesday. With that being said, I want to now go day by day and talk about the severe weather risk potential, and by far the biggest one that looks to be imminent is going to be as we go into our Friday and Friday night as of now, where I have as high as a level 5 of 7 for severe weather. This may even be upgraded in parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. A big, at least, level 3 of 7 for scattered severe weather from Texas all the way up to the Ohio Valley with these storms that are set to not only produce flooding, but also severe weather as they train on through. Scattered damaging winds of 60 to 70 miles per hour appear likely, especially over at least the yellow shaded zones. Scattered large hail will be likely, and some hail could get closer to baseball size in the strongest storms there, particularly in the orange and red shaded spots. There's also the risk for tornadoes, and that threat will of course be the most elevated, where we have the level 4 and 5 out of 7 there. Particularly around western Arkansas is where I'm seeing that possible highest threat for even strong to violent tornadoes as we go deeper through the day Friday and into Friday night. I want to show you how intense some of the ingredients leading up to this will be, and then we'll talk about some of the timing here as we dive right into it. One of the main ingredients that is making Friday so concerning is the amount of moisture that's set to move north, also indicated by these dew point values here using the HRRR model. This is short-range guidance, and you can see as we go through the day Friday that surge of very high amounts of moisture lifting north anywhere from Kentucky and Tennessee all the way back down here to eastern Oklahoma and East Texas, where especially as you go through the southwestern part of the circled zone, we're going to have that highest risk for severe weather. All of this just means high moisture, but when you overlap this with the cold front that's going to be moving in from the west, increasing wind shear or the rotation of winds as you go up through the atmosphere, 70-degree dew points is a very high amount of moisture for severe weather to tap into, and that's why I'm so concerned about any storms that we do see fire on up, especially as you get through Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma, and Texas, as well as surrounding spots later into the day on Friday. Now that we've gone over the general severe weather setup for Friday and Friday night, I want to go ahead and give you the timing for that and the flooding using this generalized overview of what you can expect with the HRRR model. First main thing that I want to point out is this warm front that we're going to be seeing lifting north and providing showers and storms along it, as well as the moisture for later day showers and storms that will eventually pop up You can see the front here as we go into around, say, mid to late morning. It's expected to move through parts of Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, as well as on over here into north central parts of Kentucky, where as we see more storms in addition to this throughout the day, we'll probably continue to see that flood threat only go up, and we'll also see the severe weather threat go up in some of these zones to at least a conditional risk that could even include damaging winds, hail, and a few tornadoes. Back down to the southwest, though, that's where the environment's going to go a little bit more untapped through at least the first part of the day. That includes Oklahoma, into northeastern Texas, into western Arkansas, where eventually, I think by the time we go through early to mid-afternoon, based on this guidance, we're likely going to be seeing a train of some supercell-type thunderstorms developing, and a supercell is essentially just a rotating storm that will, at the minimum, likely produce some hail for you that will be upwards of 1 inch to 2 inches in diameter. In some cases, we could also see not only some tornadoes, but some strong tornadoes becoming possible as well. And that looks to be a threat, especially with these supercells anywhere from Little Rock and points in between there in central Arkansas back over to eastern Oklahoma and northeast Texas. This threat could begin as early to mid-afternoon before you're even possibly commuting home from work. So you want to be on the lookout for these storms and make sure you know your plan if you're away from home as well for what you're going to do if these storms strike. We'll have the potential for at least some severe weather out of any of these storms that we see in this warm sector as well. These storms that we see here through parts of the Missouri Boot Heel, Kentucky, and western Tennessee, they'll have the at least potential to produce some severe weather hazards, and you want to be on the lookout for that as we go deeper through the afternoon. We're probably only going to continue to see our threats evolve here along the Oklahoma and Arkansas line, the Arkansas and Missouri line, all the way back down to eastern Texas as we go deeper through the evening, with some supercells as well as some linear storms. Hail's going to be widespread out of all of this activity. We'll see the damaging winds especially becoming a risk in the line, and tornadoes will continue to be a threat along and especially ahead of that line as well. Springfield, Missouri, all the way back to Tyler, Texas, points in between, really looks to be that focal corridor for not only that severe weather, but we'll even see some flooding threats become more of an issue, as well as these storms train at least through the middle of the night, likely into our Friday night. Storms will be a concern trying to knock on the door of Little Rock once again, with that line moving in from the west, possibly sometime into the middle of the night based on this guidance. Again, Friday night going into Saturday, still going strong with storms that will especially have the risk for damaging winds and hail. That risk could go all the way on up here into some parts of the Ohio Valley, as flood threats will also be elevated there. And then overnight, Friday night into Saturday, we'll be watching storms moving out of western and central Texas, trying to get on up closer to the Red River, and those could produce additional damaging wind and hail threats in particular, maybe even an isolated tornado. San Angelo, Abilene, Wichita Falls, Lawton, these are some zones from Texas up into Oklahoma that could be affected by those storms, and that's why you guys are in that level 2 or level 3 at least for severe weather as of now, because these overnight storms are going to pack a punch before we get to the end of the period, Friday night into Saturday morning. As I mentioned earlier, severe weather and flooding won't end on Friday and Friday night. We'll see it continue into the weekend. Here's a look at my ONW severe scale zones where I'd put down a level 3 or 4 out of 7 for our Saturday, April 5th, as well as Saturday night. As some of that energy from western Texas moving on up into the Red River Valley late Friday night into Saturday begins to shift east through the day, we'll probably get at least a level 3 to level 4 worthy severe weather risk exiting East Texas and East Oklahoma, and then getting closer to the lower Mississippi Valley throughout the day, and then possibly even nocturnally through Saturday night and into early Sunday morning. Scattered damaging winds, scattered large hail, and at least a few tornadoes look likely over especially the yellow and orange shaded regions as of now, so you want to make sure you're getting prepared for yet another severe weather round, as well as flooding round that will get going by the time we go towards around Saturday and Saturday night. Things won't even end there. I do have a level 3 of 7 zone that I'm pretty confident in for parts of the rest of the Gulf Coast, getting over into some parts of the Carolinas and Southeast through the day on our Sunday, April 6th. This will probably be the last main day of major severe weather being possible, with more damaging winds and hail in particular, maybe even a few tornadoes, as the secondary low pressure system that I'm talking about in this video will be wrapping up around that time. Let's go ahead and look at some of the ingredients for these Saturday and Sunday setups now. I said it earlier for the severe weather risk for Friday. I'll say it again now for the severe weather risk as we go from Friday night through Saturday and into Sunday with that secondary low for the weekend. We're going to have plenty of moisture to support severe weather. Look at this field of moisture that, until we get a cold front to come through with the system, will go generally untapped. Just a ton, a copious amount of these greens on screen at 60s and 70s for dew points. That's plenty supportive of any severe weather that we may see going out of Saturday into Sunday in those zones that I highlighted. One other thing to point out is that the low-level jet stream, which veers off from the mid and upper-level jet stream to create that wind shear that helps in tornadoes, it will also be strong as we go through the upcoming weekend. first over those zones I had highlighted for the level 3 and level 4. You can see it right down there over the lower Mississippi Valley for Saturday. Eventually, at least a conditional zone for tornadoes could continue closer to the rest of the Gulf Coast and Carolinas as we see that low-level jet stream still intense in some zones through the day Sunday. Again, ingredients are coming together. I'll talk about it more in detail as we get closer, but severe weather certainly looks likely for Saturday and Sunday, and you want to be keeping your eyes on it in those zones that I was showing. With that being said, let's go ahead and recap the discussion of all this extreme weather by talking about the total rainfall expected through the rest of this event using this forecast from the Weather Prediction Center. This is from Friday early morning through the rest of the upcoming event, but let's just start in increments here. This is just by the time we go from Friday early morning to Saturday early morning, with that warm front lifting north, with the cold front behind it that's going to produce that possible tornado outbreak into some parts of Arkansas and surrounding zones deeper through the day. From both of those two pieces of energy, we're going to be watching a huge expanse with several inches of rain possible, at least 2 to 4, just through this 24-hour period on top of recent rains that have already saturated the ground. Big problems from the Ohio Valley all the way back over to the Mississippi Valley, and some parts thereof, of course, southeastern Oklahoma and northeast Texas as well. As we go through Friday and into Friday night, flooding will become even more of a concern over those zones by the time we get through the end of the day on our Saturday into Sunday, though. With that secondary round, that next cold front coming into the weekend, that will produce, even if it's not as much severe weather, more rain. And just from Friday early morning to Sunday afternoon, looking at upwards of 6 inches of rain over Arkansas, southern Missouri, the Ohio River Valley, as well as back down here to western Tennessee, on top of recent totals we've seen. Major flooding is expected. You want to be prepared for this, but even at least isolated scattered flooding could get going all the way on up there to northern Indiana, northern Ohio. I think flood threats do go down closer to the southeast and mid-Atlantic, with less rain, only 1 inch to 3 inches in most zones, although we could at least see some isolated hazards even there as we go out of Sunday and into the very early part of next week. One last thing I want to talk about in this video as we wrap up here is how warm some of the temperatures are going to be on the southeast side of these warm fronts that are lifting north. Already by Friday, look at the record high temperatures expected. All these boxes from Texas and the Gulf Coast all the way through Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, over to Georgia and the Carolinas and Tennessee. These indicate forecasted record high temperatures with mid to upper 80s, even some 90s spreading in, with that south to north wind really kicking up through the day. It's not just going to be Friday that's warm over this region, though. While it will be mild to the north of there, right as you get to the south side of these warm fronts, continuing with plenty more 80s and possible record highs into Saturday in Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Eventually, by Sunday, though, you can see that cold front really shifting over to the east. Highs in the 70s and then closer to the 80s as you exit Alabama and Tennessee and then go over to the Carolinas, where that severe weather risk will peak through the day. But behind it, only 40s and 50s for highs over back here into parts of the Midwest. And that cooler air actually looks to be a trend as we go towards Monday, towards Tuesday. Look at that. The eastern part of the U.S. a little bit cooler with a lot of 40s and 50s over parts of the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, and Midwest. And with a cool down like that over a pretty decent zone, especially east of the Mississippi River Valley, it should prevent larger scale systems from being a thing next week, especially with severe weather potential. That is great news to hear, and that's why I also wanted to include this temperature discussion at the end of the video. With that being said, here's your quick reminder to hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss forecast videos and live streams from me in the future, all delivered in a no-hype approach. Make sure you're staying tuned for updates on the rest of the severe weather expected as we go into the weekend from this channel, as well as official sources like the National Weather Service. I'll see you right here in the next one.